Welcome to Candid Conversations. I'm your host, Jonathan Youssef. Ginger and Jeremy, welcome to Candid Conversations yet again.
Thank you so much for having us back.
Yeah, glad to be with you, John.
Well, you've got some news that I know you've shared on social media, and we're weeks away from some exciting news here.
Yeah, little one on the way. I'd say due any day because once you're about 2 weeks away from the due date, that's pretty
And
close.
especially with your third, ours, each one got shorter and shorter with the time. The last time we were on, we were talking about your New York Times best-selling book, Becoming Free Indeed. And that has been a tool that I've used. I've given that out to a number of people who maybe didn't have the exact same situation to you, but have dealt with a lot of identity issues and conforming to culture and a lot of these sorts of things, or whatever culture that they were a part of. But there's a new book out, People Pleaser, which we've just introduced, and it is an offshoot of Becoming Free Indeed. Tell us a little bit about what spurred this one coming on.
Yeah, for sure. So when I actually wrote my last book, Becoming Free Indeed, I remember wrestling so much with whether or not I should speak up against the theology I was raised in. And it was something that was really difficult for me as a people pleaser because I knew the second I opened my mouth and started to talk about these things that there would be backlash, that I could lose my community, family, friends who might not agree with me. I was afraid I was going to have people on my bad side. And so that was the last thing I wanted, was to have confrontation or conflict. But at the same time, I started to realize the necessity of speaking out because no one else was doing it at that point. And it was something that I saw was very damaging. And that teaching was causing a lot of people to even question Christianity as a whole, thinking that these teachings were the words of God, and ultimately they weren't. And I
Right.
think that that was something I noticed and wanted to speak up against. So I started to see this theme of people pleasing even throughout that book as I was writing it. And it was something that I knew I had struggled with for years from the time I was young, whether that was trying to please my parents, then into my teen years, wanting to please my peers, and struggled with like an eating disorder then, and things like that, where I was trying to gain the acceptance and approval of others all along the way. Then when I got to this point as an adult, I realized it was something that was really difficult for me to break free from. And so I wanted to be able to share my story of how I've worked through people pleasing throughout the years and what it looks like in different seasons of life. And so that's where that book came from, was through that process of writing Becoming Free Indeed. I realized how much of a people pleaser I was.
I wanted Jeremy to be in this conversation because in reading the book, I realized how integral he is to this aspect of your story. And you've just shared with us that it's like it was a part of your life. It was a part of who you were, how you lived, how you were raised. But it's like the light really began to shine on it when you were getting married, and those realities started coming forth because you were no longer kind of under the shelter of your family, which obviously you have a very unique perspective because your whole life was really in a fishbowl, and yet you were kind of protected in a sense from that outside community for a while. But then it's like as your marriage and as your relationship came together, because we understand the nuance and the design of marriage. There's communication, intimacy of communication, and it's like those people-pleasing aspects were really coming to the forefront. Tell us a little bit about how your realization of the fact that you were a people pleaser kind of came about.
Yeah, I think that it definitely started early in marriage because the minute we were married, right, I realized how much of a people pleaser I was in that time because the teachings that I was raised under, they highlighted the responsibility of the woman to keep the man happy at all times. And so part of that was being completely agreeable with him. And I think I took that teaching as just gospel truth. Like, this
Yeah.
is how I'm going to make Jeremy happy. I want to have the house perfectly clean. I want to look great every day. I want to be happy. Even if I've had a rough day, I don't want to tell him. And if he asks me where I want to go to dinner, I don't want to say. But Jeremy really pursued my heart and said, okay, no, I want to figure out who Ginger is. I don't want you to be a clone of me. And I don't know what you'd say to that, babe. Like in those early years, I think I was just like so agreeable with him that it was probably actually very annoying at times.
It was exacerbated in marriage because when we were dating and getting to know each other, I didn't notice it as much, and maybe just because of the nature of our relationship, we were often around other people and whatever. I think it exacerbated when she was taken completely out of her context. She wasn't in what was familiar. She was in a new
Mhm.
state, new marriage, new church, new everything. And I think that was unsettling for someone who'd been raised in such a tight-knit community. And then for her, yeah, just wanting to make sure we constantly got along. And I think probably feeling some of the pressures of marriage in courtship circles, there's constant emphasis on making sure you guys don't like mess this thing up, I guess, in the sense of like obviously you want to be faithful and loyal and but there's so much pressure put on that. It's like as soon as you guys are announced as public, it's pressure to be married, pressure to have this great relationship, whatever. And so I think she was just feeling accumulation of all these things. And it was like she did not want to make me upset. And I was like,
Mhm.
Ginge, like if we can disagree. Like I want tacos, you want pizza. Like let's talk about it. Like this isn't going to end our marriage, because you want pizza and I want tacos. It's not like I'm just going to go, forget it, I'm out of here. And yet, I think part of that was the superstition that she had. Like Bill
Mhm.
Gothard was a master manipulator, so he would instill superstition in people's minds where they thought, if I have a bad day as a wife, my husband's going to commit adultery.
Mhm.
So I'm just going, hey, Ginge, we're good. Like, remember that one moment I was like, till death do us part, Like, remember when I was like, yeah, I do, in sickness and in health?
Up until
Like,
you wanted pizza over tacos, and then that
right.
was,
I know,
I'm like,
right?
so I think her realizing just a combination of things and me just helping her by saying, it wasn't like I did anything. I didn't change her. I was just trying to say, hey, be yourself. Like I see leadership in marriage from a husband isn't like a cattle driver. I think a lot of guys, especially sadly in like some
yes,
niche evangelical circles, see it
yes,
as like I'm the boss.
right.
Well, the leadership in marriage is, if we're going to follow Jesus' example, is like cultivating a garden. And I want my wife to blossom and bloom and be everything she's designed to be. And so I was just encouraging her, like, Ginge, I want to hear from you. I want to know
Mhm.
you. I want your thoughts. I want your input. We're a team here. I need your insight, your input, your correction. And I think she would have never corrected me. I mean, it was
Mhm.
like a foreign thought to
Mhm.
correct her husband.
Yeah.
So I want that correction. I want we're on the same team. We're going the same direction. We're on the same trajectory here.
Mhm.
So just encouraging her. And I remember time after time in the car going, "Hey, Ginge, like, what do you want to do?" And then here's one thing. I don't know if you talk about this in your book. It just came to my mind though, is she would often respond if I pointed something out. She would respond before she actually engaged it.
Mhm.
Right? Remember that?
Yeah.
Where I'd be like, "Oh, look at that. Is that cool?" And she'd go, "Wow." And I'd go, "Ginge, you didn't even look. Like, you didn't even like before she'd be texting and
Yeah.
go, "Oh, wow." And then she'd look. I'm going, "Wait, why'd you say, 'Oh, wow'? You weren't wowed."
Like an idiosyncratic reaction or something, right?
Yeah, it was part of the culture where you just were like,
Firm.
yeah, you always affirm everything. You don't really have much of a thought about it, about what's happening around you almost.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because he really helped to bring me out of that and to help me think through even just the little things, the harder things. If there was a concern I had about something or a decision we were making as a family, it was hard for me to bring that up. And so he just gave me the safe space to realize that arguments don't equal rejection. And that was something that I had always assumed. And it was hard for me to work through it, but at the same time, it was really freeing. And I started to blossom and grow in that setting.
Let me ask a kind of a follow-up question to that, just for my own trying to piece it together. So up until that point, living within the sort of IBLP Gothard framework, were your decision-making skills like in their infancy? Was it like, I don't even want to have an opinion? Or was it just stuff and repress, like you find beauty in things, but you just would, if somebody else didn't, you would just remain silent? Or was it like, I'm only going to listen to whatever my parents or siblings or whoever, and then I'll adopt that, and that becomes my reality?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it was from the culture that we were raised in, and some of it was temperamental because I am going to be a little bit more passive. But at the same time, if I did have an opinion, I would be so afraid to speak my mind on it, and I wouldn't want to do that. It would be out of place. And so I think that there was a lot of suppression of what I actually would think and feel, and I wouldn't want to share out of fear. And a lot of that goes back to the fear-based teachings of Bill Gothard. Like Jeremy said, tons of superstition. And so if I say something out of place to my husband, then it basically would all come back on me. If we had that disagreement, it didn't go well, and maybe now he views me wrong. And so that was a lot of pressure to keep up. And so even if you were a people pleaser in that setting, if you weren't, if you were more black and white, you had to suppress a lot of your thoughts and opinions.
Obviously, your upbringing is unique, but the book isn't for people who necessarily have your upbringing.
Yeah, so this book, it is for anybody who is a people pleaser or recovering people pleaser. And I think that often it's hard to tell because you can say, okay, well, I'm not a people pleaser. I don't care what anybody thinks. And at the same time, I think that there are so many elements of this. So there are different forms of people pleasing. And that's kind of what I wanted to cover in this book because I put a people pleaser assessment in the beginning, in the closer to the beginning of the book, because I wanted those who think when they pick up this book, I'm not a people pleaser, to like be honest with yourself and assess where you are. Because for me, my people pleasing, it looked like isolation. So I didn't want people to see who I truly was. I wanted to hide my flaws. I wanted to hide my weaknesses, keep everybody, thinking I was the best Christian ever, best mom, best wife, and not let anybody into my life because I thought that's how I was going to keep everyone happy. And then have others on the other side who we've seen in the church who are the serial servers, as we call them. They're the ones who are constantly doing everything. They're serving the potluck lunch, they're playing piano, they're cleaning up after, they're leading Bible study and prayer meeting, and somehow juggling a family of 10 kids. And it's like, well, that's great. But at the same time, you can see half the time the family is falling apart. They're not able to say no. So
Yeah.
there's that side as well, which you see. And so on either side, it all goes back to motivation. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Who am I doing it for? What is this driving motivation in my life is it to gain the acceptance and approval of others? When I enter a room, is it to look at those people and say, okay, how can I love them and serve them from a place of satisfaction where I realize who I am in Christ? I'm not trying to gain anything from them. That's the place where I think a lot of people pleasers, you have to look at it as a whole and just say, okay, I want to evaluate where I am.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do. But at the same time, when you realize, okay, I'm going to be honest about my motivation behind why I'm doing what I'm doing, it actually can bring freedom and help you to love others well.
And I think, John, you and I would look at this from a theological standpoint as the fear of man. And so, from one degree to another, everyone has the fear of man. So there are some people who label themselves as people pleasers who would look at a book like this and go, "Oh, that's me. I need that." And I think Ginger does this masterfully as she goes through, identifies ways where maybe classically you don't think you're a people pleaser, and then discover, oh yeah, I really am being driven by wanting to gain, keep, or yeah, change people's perception of me.
Mm,
It is the fear of man. Nobody perfectly fears God alone.
right.
We all have people pleasing or the fear of man within us that motivates our actions.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I think people pleaser is such a helpful way to put it, but it does come down to the fear or the being a respecter of persons above a respecter of God.
I fully agree, and your publisher is going to thank me for this. But I actually, in reading through, I realized this was a really helpful tool for me. Whereas, yes, I agree that we all have elements within us, but the way that you've written it, it actually helped me to understand people who more nearly identify with the kind of the two that you just described. Because as I'm reading, I'm thinking, I don't really have that specific nuanced aspect of it. There's other areas, of course, in my life where I was challenged by the book. But at the same time, I thought this has actually helped me understand people who are the serial servers, or their value is kind of caught up in what's being perceived, and it's actually helped me kind of it's given me tools to then go, well, one, here, I think you probably need to get this book. But two, like to just understand their own framework. Because in a lot of places I thought, I don't really understand. I don't have that need in that specific area to do that. But now that Ginger has painted a really clear picture for that, I understand, because in my own personality, and Jeremy, you may have seen this as you kind of walked through a lot of this with Ginger. I'm kind of like, why would you do that? Why would that matter? And then I realized, okay, just because that's my perspective doesn't mean that that's the answer, right? It's like it's just given me an insight into the framework in which you're operating out of. And there's a lot of us. I think everyone who's listening to this is either a people pleaser or is very like close friends or a family member or whatever. And so I think it's got such a wide reach. And you're right. There are so many aspects of this that even I was challenged by as a self-professed non-people pleaser, but someone who has aspects of the fear of man. In the book, you talked about how patterns of unhealthy relationships that can develop. There are patterns that can come in people's lives. You had a unique experience where you were kind of removed from that pattern, but that's not always everyone's situation.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that when it comes down to it, it's like we can, even as people pleasers, right? There can be people in our lives that, maybe they're not a healthy relationship, and we can get wrapped up in trying to please them, even if it's like not standing up for your kids in a situation where you feel uncomfortable. This person's probably not the safest person to be around. Well, I don't know what I should do. Should I protect my kids? Should I just keep this negative like abuser at bay, or should I speak up? And I think as a people pleaser, that's something that's very hard to do. And often people will follow those patterns of what they've known if they're not willing to voice an opinion or stand up and say, this is not okay. I'm going to protect my loved ones. I'm going to protect my kids. And I think that that's something that's very, very difficult to do. And by the grace of God, I did come out of those teachings. And I think that was something that I never would have had any clue that that was possible.
Right.
Because for me, as a people pleaser, it's easier just to stay in the mold, to keep everyone happy. Like I said, even writing that book, Becoming Free Indeed, was so hard because I am just generally geared towards not causing confrontation or conflict. And so God, He gives us grace and help to do those things that He's called us to do whenever we are in a place where, we see the need as a people pleaser. And then also when we have community around us to support. And I think that was something for years that I had kind of stiff-armed community because I was afraid of how they would view me and not wanting to let people into the challenges in my life. And when I did, though, it gave me the courage to realize, okay, even if my community that I was raised in doesn't agree with what I'm doing today, I ultimately know that God does, and I have other godly counselors around me who I'm I'm able to talk to about these things and process through, and they're encouraging me to move forward and to speak up and to stand up for truth. And so I think that's something too that we realize we were designed for community. It's not a bad thing to have people like want to like us. We see it from the beginning. Even in the Trinity, there's community there. Adam and Eve, that community that God created. The church is a beautiful world of love. It is flawed because of the fall. And that's something that we have to remember. And relationships do require risk. But at the same time, when you are in a community, in a setting like that, you're letting people into your life, even when you don't have it all together, and the messy stuff and the joys of life. And that also, as someone who struggles to speak up for truth, that will give you the confidence to know, okay, I'm walking in the right way. This is a time to speak up. And I have surrounded myself with people who see me and they will speak truth and encourage me to speak up when I need to.
I loved, that aspect of the book because I don't know, but I would assume that if you were to pick up a self-help book on people pleasing, what would the concepts be? It would probably be reserve time for yourself and isolate or something to that effect, right? And yet what you're trying to do in the book is actually it's kind of like a the diagnosis is what you're dealing with, right? It's like you still need to be with people. It's not removing yourself from people and spending time with just yourself. It is actually continuing to have that community, but it's actually the question then is what is the heart attitude? Let me just read one little section from the book, and hopefully you didn't cut it out because this was an original copy. To be free from the desperate, agenda-filled, approval-seeking claws of unhealthy people-pleasing means that you are free to now care for and help your fellow human beings from a place that demands nothing of them. You serve for the joy of serving. We're going to stop here for today. Don't worry, there is more of this conversation with Jeremy and Jinger Vuolo. Join us next time as we continue our discussion on breaking free from people-pleasing. We will talk about the concept of trading down our inheritance. It's a helpful concept that you won't want to miss. Thank you for listening to Candid Conversations. If you found this conversation helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. We'll see you next time.